A single gunshot shattered the quiet stillness of the Texas twilight as Samuel Jennings rushed to his porch, rifle in hand, only to find not a threat but a woman pale as death itself slumped over an exhausted horse that had somehow found its way to his isolated ranch. The year was 1875, and Fort Davis, Texas remained a harsh outpost on the frontier where only the strong survived. Samuel, known to most as Sam, had carved out a life for himself after the war between the states, seeking solitude among the Davis Mountains where he raised cattle and kept to himself. At 32, he'd long abandoned any notion of companionship, the memories of the war having hardened him into a man of few words and fewer relationships. The woman's body began to slip from the saddle as her unconscious form lost what little grip remained. Sam dropped his rifle and lunged forward, catching her just before she hit the ground. Her skin burned against his calloused hands, fever radiating through the thin, dust-covered dress she wore. Long auburn hair, matted with sweat and dirt, framed a face both beautiful and alarmingly pallid. "Madam." Sam called but received no response. Her breathing came shallow and rapid, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird beneath his fingers. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms and carried her toward his cabin, his mind racing with questions about who she might be and what circumstances had delivered her to his doorstep. Inside the modest cabin, Sam laid the woman on his bed, noting the torn state of her traveling clothes and the absence of any baggage. Her boots were worn through, telling the story of a long, desperate journey. As he removed them to make her more comfortable, a small folded paper fell from within. He picked it up and unfolded it to reveal a hastily scrawled note. "Beatrice Vallens, reward for safe return to Jeremiah Vallens, Austin." Sam frowned at the note, then at the woman Beatrice. A reward suggested she was either very valuable or very wanted, neither of which boded well for a man who preferred to avoid entanglements with the law or other people's business. Yet something about her desperate state compelled him to help regardless of the consequences. He set water to boil on the stove and gathered what few medical supplies he had: quinine tablets he'd purchased from the doctor in Fort Davis, clean cloths, and a bottle of whiskey. The fever gripping her could be any number of ailments that plagued travelers in this unforgiving territory: typhoid, malaria, or simply exhaustion combined with infection from an unseen wound. As night fell, Sam bathed Beatrice's face with cool water, trying to bring down her temperature. He managed to coax a few sips of water between her parched lips, along with crushed quinine mixed with honey to mask the bitterness. Her delirium was evident as she mumbled incoherently, occasionally calling out names he didn't recognize. "Edward, please, they'll kill you." She whispered, her voice so fragile it nearly broke. "You're safe now," Sam replied, though he couldn't promise such a thing. Safety was never guaranteed in the West, especially for a woman clearly running from something or someone. For 3 days, Sam barely left her side, sleeping only in short bursts while seated in a chair beside the bed. He tended to his livestock at dawn and dusk, returning quickly to check on his unexpected patient. On the morning of the 4th day, her fever finally broke, and Sam found himself looking into clear hazel eyes that regarded him with equal parts fear and confusion. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Sam placed a cup of water to her lips. "My ranch." "About 15 miles outside Fort Davis. Found you half dead on a horse 4 days back." She drank gratefully before asking, "And you are?" "Samuel Jennings. Most call me Sam." He stood awkwardly, suddenly aware of how close he'd been to this stranger for days. "You're Beatrice Vallens, I reckon." "Found a note in your boot." Alarm flashed across her face. "You've not sent word to Austin, have you?" Sam shook his head. "Haven't left your side long enough to ride into town." He hesitated before adding, "Figured there might be a reason you were riding alone through dangerous country with no supplies." Relief visibly washed over her features. "Thank you, Mr. Jennings. I can't go back there." "It's your business," he replied simply. "But you're not going anywhere until you can stand without falling over. Fever's broken, but you're weak as a newborn calf." Beatrice attempted to sit up, proving his point as dizziness overtook her and she fell back against the pillow. "I don't want to be a burden." Already been one for 4 days, Sam said, though without malice. Few more won't matter. In the days that followed, Beatrice slowly regained her strength. Sam prepared simple but nourishing meals: venison stew, cornbread, and eggs from his small henhouse. Though initially reluctant to share her story, the isolation of the ranch and Sam's quiet, undemanding presence eventually loosened her tongue. I was to be married, she explained one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. To Jeremiah Vallens, the man who's offering a reward, Sam observed. Beatrice nodded, her hands tightening around the mug of coffee she held. He's twice my age, a businessman from Austin with political aspirations. My father arranged the marriage to settle debts. I didn't meet Jeremiah until the engagement was announced. Not uncommon, Sam said, though he frowned at the practice. Perhaps not, but what followed was. Her voice grew softer. Jeremiah's first wife died under mysterious circumstances. Her brother Edward tried to convince me she was murdered. He had evidence, letters she'd written about fearing for her life. Sam's expression darkened. And nobody investigated. Jeremiah has powerful friends. Edward was found dead a week before the wedding. They said it was a robbery gone wrong. Beatrice took a shuddering breath. That night, I overheard Jeremiah speaking with someone about taking care of the problem permanently. I knew I was next if I stayed. So you ran, with nothing but the clothes on my back and Edward's horse. I rode for days, barely stopping. The fever must have started somewhere near the Colorado River. She looked at Sam with genuine gratitude. If you hadn't found me. But I did, Sam replied simply, uncomfortable with her thanks. As another week passed, Beatrice's strength returned. Sam taught her simple tasks around the ranch: gathering eggs, tending the small vegetable garden, even basic aspects of caring for the horses. He noticed how quickly she learned, her determination evident in everything she attempted. One morning, Sam returned from checking his cattle to find Beatrice had prepared a full breakfast: biscuits, bacon, and coffee. The sight of someone else moving comfortably in his space should have disturbed him, but instead, he felt something long dormant stir within his chest. Thought you might be hungry, she said with a small smile. It's not much compared to what you've done for me. Looks better than what I usually manage, Sam replied, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. He noticed she'd swept the floor and arranged wildflowers in an old tin can on the table. These small touches of domesticity highlighted how sparse his existence had been. During meals, Beatrice gradually drew out Sam's own story: his childhood in Tennessee, fighting for the Confederacy more out of geographical obligation than conviction, and his decision to start fresh in Texas, where the land didn't harbor memories of battles and fallen friends. Do you ever get lonely out here? She asked one night as they sat by the fireplace, the spring chill still requiring a small fire in the evenings. Sam considered the question longer than he normally would have. Used to think solitude suited me. After the war, couldn't stand being around people much. Their voices, their questions, their expectations. He stared into the flames. Been here 7 years now. Sometimes weeks go by without speaking to another soul besides my horse. And now, does it still suit you? His eyes met hers across the warm glow of the fire, finding it less appealing than before. The following day, Sam rode into Fort Davis for supplies, leaving Beatrice with a loaded shotgun and strict instructions to remain indoors. The small frontier town bustled with its usual mix of soldiers from the fort, ranchers, and the occasional stagecoach passengers. While loading supplies at the general store, Sam overheard a conversation that sent a chill down his spine. Offering $500 now, a well-dressed stranger was saying to the shopkeeper. Woman named Beatrice Vallens, auburn hair, hazel eyes, ran off before their wedding, husband-to-be's worried sick. Haven't seen anyone fitting that description, the shopkeeper replied. But that's a handsome reward. What'd she do besides leave the poor fellow at the altar? Stole family heirlooms, valuable jewelry, I'm told. The man slid a wanted poster across the counter. Telegram if you see her. Sam kept his expression neutral, finishing his transaction without betraying the anger and concern churning within him. He loaded his supplies quickly and rode out of town, taking a circuitous route back to his ranch in case anyone followed. When he arrived home, he found Beatrice sitting on the porch steps, anxiety evident in her posture. "I was worried," she said as he dismounted. "You're later than expected. Had reason to be careful." Sam explained what he'd overheard. "They're saying you stole jewelry." Beatrice's face paled. "That's a lie. I took nothing but the clothes I wore and Edward's horse. Jeremiah's creating a pretense to have me arrested or worse." "I believe you," Sam said simply, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "But $500 will have every bounty hunter and desperate man for 100 miles looking for you." "I should go," she said, rising to her feet. "I've put you in danger long enough." Sam caught her arm gently. "And go where, with winter coming on and half of Texas looking for you?" He shook his head. "No, we need a better plan." That night, they discussed options late into the evening. Beatrice couldn't return to her family, who would simply deliver her back to Jeremiah. Continuing to run seemed equally futile with such a substantial reward on her head. "What if we could prove what Jeremiah did?" Sam suggested. "If Edward had evidence about the first wife's death, there might be more to find. Even if we could," Beatrice said despondently, "Jeremiah's connections would protect him." Sam fell silent, considering alternatives. Finally, he spoke words that surprised even himself. "Marry me instead." Beatrice stared at him, bewildered. "What? As my wife, you'd have protection under the law. Jeremiah's claim would hold less weight against a husband's." Sam's pragmatic tone belied the way his heart pounded at his own suggestion. "Just on paper, of course, for protection. You would do that for me, a woman you barely know." Sam looked away, uncomfortable with her scrutiny. "Known you well enough these past weeks. You're honest and hardworking. Not afraid of this life." He gestured to the modest cabin and the land beyond. "And I reckon I've grown accustomed to having someone to talk to besides my horse." A small smile played at Beatrice's lips. "That's hardly a romantic proposal, Mr. Jennings." "Wasn't meant to be romantic," he replied gruffly. "Just practical." But as their eyes met across the table, both recognized the unspoken truth. Something beyond practicality had been growing between them since the day Beatrice had opened her eyes to find Sam watching over her. 2 days later, they rode together to Fort Davis, Beatrice wearing men's clothes borrowed from Sam and her hair tucked beneath a hat. The town's preacher, an elderly man who had known Sam since his arrival in the territory, asked few questions about the hasty ceremony or Sam's unusually taciturn bride. "Never thought I'd see the day Samuel Jennings took a wife," the preacher commented as he signed the marriage certificate. "The Lord works in mysterious ways." "That he does," Sam agreed, his hand resting protectively on Beatrice's shoulder. The return to the ranch carried a different energy, their relationship fundamentally altered by the simple ceremony and the signed paper Sam carried in his pocket. That night, Beatrice insisted on sleeping on a pallet near the fireplace despite Sam's offering of the bed. "You're my wife now, on paper at least. Take the bed," he insisted. "And you've slept in that chair long enough because of me," she countered. "Your back must be permanently bent by now." Their compromise was to share the small cabin's single room with a curtain hung between the bed and the fireplace, a thin barrier symbolizing the line between their arrangement of convenience, and something deeper neither was ready to acknowledge. Life settled into a new rhythm at the Jennings ranch. Sam taught Beatrice to shoot, insisting she practice until she could hit a can from 20 paces without hesitation. She proved a quick study, her determination making up for her initial lack of experience. In return, she transformed the sparse cabin into a home, adding touches that reflected her personality, a quilt she began piecing together from scraps, herbs growing in cups along the windowsill, and a system of organization that somehow made the small space seem larger. Spring arrived, bringing with it wildflowers that carpeted the surrounding meadows. Sam found himself watching Beatrice as she gathered blossoms to dry for tea, the sun highlighting the auburn in her hair that had regained its luster under her care. He caught himself smiling more, speaking more, planning improvements to the ranch he'd never bothered with before, a larger garden, an addition to the cabin, perhaps even more cattle come next season. "Why did you really help me that night?" Beatrice asked one evening as they sat on the porch, the ritual of watching the sunset having become sacred to them both. You could have taken me to town, claimed any reward being offered. Sam considered his answer carefully. War changes a man, makes him see things differently. He rubbed his thumb over a scar on his palm, a nervous habit she'd noticed before. Saw too many people left behind, abandoned when they needed help most. Swore I wouldn't become that kind of man, no matter how much I wanted to be left alone. And now, do you regret it, this arrangement? Sam turned to her, his blue eyes holding hers steadily. Not for a single moment. The undercurrent between them grew stronger as spring yielded to summer. Their fingers would brush when passing dishes, lingering longer than necessary. Conversations extended deep into the night, revealing hopes and fears neither had shared with another soul. The curtain dividing the cabin became more symbol than barrier. In July, the danger they had been avoiding arrived on their doorstep. Sam returned from mending fences to find 3 riders in the yard, one unmistakably the well-dressed man from the general store months earlier. Beatrice stood on the porch, shotgun in hand, her stance unwavering despite the fear Sam could read in her eyes. "Gentlemen," Sam called, riding slowly toward them, his own rifle resting casually across his lap. "Something I can help you with." The well-dressed man turned, revealing an expensive suit despite the dust of travel. "Perhaps, we're looking for a woman, Beatrice Vallens. Ran away from Austin some months back." "No Vallens here," Sam replied evenly, dismounting and handing the reins to Beatrice, who had moved to his side. His hand brushed hers in silent reassurance. "Just my wife and me." The man's eyes narrowed as he studied Beatrice's face. "Your wife bears a striking resemblance to the woman we seek." "My wife is Beatrice Jennings," Sam said, emphasizing the surname. "Has been since April. If you're suggesting otherwise, you're calling me a liar on my own property." One of the other riders, clearly a hired gun, moved his hand toward his holster. "Mr. Vallens is offering $1,000 now, enough to make most men reconsider their certainties." "Not interested in your money," Sam replied, his voice hardening. "Now, unless you have legitimate business here, I'll thank you to move along. We've work to do." The well-dressed man produced a folded paper from his jacket. "I have a warrant for Miss Vallens' arrest on charges of theft, signed by a judge in Austin." "That paper holds no weight against a marriage certificate." Beatrice spoke for the first time, her voice steadier than Sam had expected. "And I stole nothing from Jeremiah Vallens except my own freedom." "Freedom purchased with his property," the man countered smoothly. "The law disagrees with your assessment, Mrs. Jennings, if that is truly your name." Sam stepped forward, placing himself between Beatrice and the visitors. "You'll find the territorial judge in Fort Davis more concerned with local matters than with pleasing wealthy men in Austin. He's dining at our table next Sunday. You're welcome to join us and present your case to him directly." The bluff was bold. Sam had never so much as spoken to the judge, but delivered with such conviction that uncertainty flickered across the man's face. "You're harboring a fugitive," he said, though with less certainty. "I'm protecting my wife," Sam corrected, "and I'll continue doing so by whatever means necessary." His hand rested casually near his sidearm, making the implied threat clear. A tense silence stretched between them before the man finally folded the warrant and returned it to his pocket. "This isn't the end of the matter." "For today it is," Sam replied. "Your horses look tired. Fort Davis is 15 miles southeast. You'll want to make good time before dark." The men departed, though the backward glances they cast made it clear the confrontation was merely postponed, not abandoned. When they disappeared from view, Beatrice's composure crumbled and she leaned against Sam, trembling. "They'll be back," she whispered, "or others will come." Sam wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Then we'll be ready." That night, after securing every window and door, Sam found Beatrice staring into the fireplace, her expression distant. "We should have a plan," she said without preamble. "If they return with more men, or if they take you by surprise when I'm alone." "Already have one," Sam replied, sitting beside her. "Been thinking on it since we married. There's a place up in the mountains, an old line shack from when this was all open range. Nobody knows about it except the old-timers, and most of them are gone now. If trouble comes, that's where you go. I've stocked it with supplies. Beatrice turned to him, surprise evident in her expression. You've been preparing all this time. A man protects what's his, Sam said simply, then caught himself. I mean what he's responsible for. In the flickering firelight, Beatrice's eyes reflected something beyond gratitude. She reached for his hand, her fingers intertwining with his calloused ones. And what if I don't want to run anymore, Sam? What if I'm tired of looking over my shoulder, waiting for the past to catch up with me? Then we face it together, he replied, his voice rough with emotion he rarely allowed himself to express. Whatever comes. The space between them seemed to shrink, the months of restraint and uncertainty dissolving as Beatrice leaned forward. Her lips met his tentatively at first, then with growing confidence as Sam responded, his free hand moving to cradle her face. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the pretense of their arrangement had vanished completely. I never expected this, Beatrice whispered. When I fled Austin, I thought my life was over. And now, Sam asked, vulnerable in a way he hadn't been since before the war. Now I think it was just beginning, she smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. That fever was the best thing that ever happened to me, Sam laughed, the sound rusty but genuine, not how most would see it. Most haven't found what I have, she touched his face gently. A home, safety, you. That night, the curtain dividing the cabin came down permanently. In its place grew a genuine marriage, built on respect and shared adversity as much as the deepening love between them. True to Sam's prediction, Jeremiah's men returned 2 weeks later, this time with 6 riders. They found the ranch occupied by Sam, Beatrice, and 5 neighboring ranchers who had responded to Sam's invitation for a social gathering, all armed and pointedly protective of the couple who had become valued members of the small ranching community. The confrontation ended before it began, the odds clearly against Jeremiah's representatives. But Sam and Beatrice knew the threat remained as long as Jeremiah Vallens held power and grudges in equal measure. Their opportunity came unexpectedly in September, when a U.S. Marshal arrived at the ranch seeking water for his horse and shelter from an approaching storm. Over dinner, the lawman mentioned his current assignment investigating corruption among certain officials in Austin who were suspected of taking bribes from businessmen seeking government contracts. One name keeps coming up, the marshal said, cutting into the venison Beatrice had prepared. Jeremiah Vallens, know anything about him? Sam and Beatrice exchanged glances before Beatrice carefully recounted her story, the arranged marriage, Edward's suspicions about the first wife's death, and her own narrow escape. The marshal listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. This Edward, you said he had evidence. The marshal asked. Letters from Jeremiah's first wife expressing fear for her life, Beatrice confirmed, but they disappeared after Edward was killed. The marshal nodded thoughtfully. Vallens is being investigated for multiple crimes: land fraud, bribery, intimidation. Murder would complete the picture if those letters still exist somewhere. They might, Beatrice said suddenly, straightening. Edward's sister Elizabeth, she and Margaret, Jeremiah's first wife, were close friends. If anyone would have copies of those letters, it would be her. Worth looking into, the marshal agreed. I'll be in Austin next month, could pay her a visit. 4 months later, a telegram arrived from Fort Davis. Vallens arrested. Charges include murder and corruption, safe to come out of hiding. Marshal Thompson. The sense of freedom that washed over them was overwhelming. That evening, as they celebrated with a special dinner, Sam reached across the table to take Beatrice's hand. Been thinking, he said, uncharacteristically hesitant. Now that you're truly free, you have choices again. Could go anywhere, do anything. Beatrice studied him, understanding the unspoken question. Are you asking if I want to leave, Sam? He shrugged, trying and failing to appear nonchalant. Married me out of necessity, different circumstances now. Beatrice rose from her chair and moved around the table, kneeling beside him. Samuel Jennings, I may have married you for protection, but I stay with you for love. She placed his hand over her stomach, her eyes shining. Besides, I don't think our child would appreciate being uprooted now. Sam's expression transformed from uncertainty to wonder. A child, you're certain? Dr. Willis confirmed it when we were in town last week. she replied, smiling at his reaction. Come spring, there will be 3 Jennings on this ranch. Sam pulled her into his arms, emotion overwhelming his usual reserve. Never thought I'd have this, he confessed against her hair. A wife, a child, a true home. All because I arrived with a fever and no strength, Beatrice said softly, and a cowboy nursed me back to health. Best thing I ever did, Sam replied, kissing her with all the love he'd once thought himself incapable of feeling. The following spring brought not just wildflowers to the meadows surrounding the Jennings ranch, but also the cries of Samuel James Jennings, Jr., born on a clear April morning with his mother's hazel eyes and his father's determined spirit. The cabin, expanded over the winter to include a proper bedroom and nursery, rang with new life and purpose. As Beatrice watched Sam gently rock their son on the porch that had witnessed so much of their story, she reflected on the desperate journey that had led her to this place, how what seemed like the end of everything had actually been the beginning of a life richer than she could have imagined. The fever that nearly claimed her life had instead delivered her to the man who would save not just her body, but her heart as well. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "How sometimes we find exactly what we need when we least expect it," she replied, joining her family on the porch as the Texas sunset painted their world in gold, a perfect metaphor for the precious life they had built together from the most unlikely of beginnings.